It's easy as a leader to get into a situation where your communication is like a ball of string or rope that's all knotted together. For example, a conflict that's escalating, or a project that's stalling, or a cultural issue on a global team. It's like these knotted rope. It's very hard to find out where the end is and to resolve it. My guest today on the After Dinner Leadership podcast is Maria Garaitonandia, and she is an expert in communication and cultural communication, and she's written a book called Untangling Communication. Like, how do we get these threads open and get clarity in the way we're speaking with each other? And she shares a model, a framework that is a really helpful 5-step tool called CLEAR that can be really useful to apply to these tricky situations to encourage and enable us to be able to have much clearer communication. Those knots get untangled and we've got clarity in the way that we're speaking with each other. Take a listen and please share it with someone in your team who you think would find it valuable to be able to strengthen their communication skills. Enjoy. A special welcome to the After Dinner Leadership podcast to Maria Garaitonandia. Welcome, Maria. It's lovely to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Simon.
It's great to have you here. And we've got this virtual dinner table around us here. Whilst we've met several times, Maria, we've never met in person. It's always been on a virtual platform. So I look forward to the day when we can actually physically see each other and eat good food together. But imagine we're around this dinner table. What food reminds you of your childhood?
My favorite food, well, the food that was comfort food and that we would have on special occasions, living in the US, but my parents are both Cuban, would be a full Cuban meal with pork, rice and beans, plantains, and maybe even a sweet pastry made out of guava. That's the Cuban, typical Cuban fare.
Sounds delicious. Great. Thank you. And the dessert there, that like what is, I can't picture it in my mind. Is it just, what kind of pastry are we talking about?
So it's kind of like a phyllo dough, like one of those flaky, pastries. And inside you put like either guava jelly or guava paste. Yep. And it's just delicious. It's a very typical, something you would have like with coffee, or, you can have it as a dessert.
Great. Well, that sounds lovely. I look forward to that when we meet in person.
Miami's a place to go for that.
For sure. And really, the other thing I'm intrigued by, just to go back into your history a little bit, is what were you like what was memorable about you as a 20-something?
When I was 25, I was having children.
Right.
I started young. So I was, I had one child and was expecting the next. I was fully immersed into the importance of leaving my legacy.
Yes.
So my 20s was all about having the kids. I would joke with my husband because, of course, I put my career on pause, but I said, you know what, my kids won't know that we're poor, but they'll remember that mom was there. So I was very conscious that I wanted to have kids. And since I was young, I had energy and I had fun, and you're a kid yourself, so you have so much fun with babies. So I knew that eventually I would go back into my professional life, but that was the moment where I just wanted to enjoy my children. I know that a lot of people are not having kids that young anymore, but it's something that I am so grateful that I did.
Yeah. Well, we have some affinity there. I was at 25. I think we had two children around that time, maybe 3. two children, and I agree. I have the grandchildren now, and I love them dearly, and they're fantastic, but they're exhausting. It's like, I'm so glad I had my little ones when I was in my 20s, when I had the energy to manage them. And
you're still a young grandfather, so you can enjoy them, as much, I'm still pretty lithe and I can still do stuff with, and throw kids up but, I probably wouldn't do that in about 10 years time. So
yeah. Oh, it's delightful. Great. Well, that is very memorable. Now, one of the things that I'd love to explore is a question we ask everybody that comes on the shows. What 3 leadership lessons do you wish you'd learned earlier?
The first one is ask for help.
Yeah.
The second one would be continually strive to learn more all the time. Don't get lazy, like thinking that you're okay. And the third one is that you can be strong in your communication without being aggressive.
Nice. I look forward to exploring all of those in detail. Why don't we take them in sequence, actually? Like this idea of asking for help. This suggests there was a time when you didn't, and you should have done. So what's the backstory to this leadership lesson, asking for help?
It's probably a cultural trait. I think that, especially in Anglo-speaking countries, I think that you don't want to inconvenience others. You don't want to take up a lot of their time. You don't want to seem like a burden. Yeah. And that's seeped into my work ethic as well, where you don't want to bother people, right? Even now, I still, in my 50s, it's something I sometimes struggle because you don't want to inconvenience. But I find that somebody told me, have you had somebody who has sought your mentorship? And I said, yes. And they would say, well, how did you feel when you were helping them out? And I said, oh, it's fantastic. You feel like, you're imparting this wisdom, and it feels uplifting to help maybe somebody who's younger or inexperienced in a certain field, to give them or help them with a piece of knowledge that you might have that they don't. And so this person said to me, so why would you deny somebody the satisfaction of doing the same for you? And
great point.
It gave me this insight that I hadn't had before. And I thought, why not? And so in the last few years, I have asked people if they wouldn't mind sitting down for an hour, mentoring me. And it has been incredible how generous people are and how much you can learn by not being quite so proud and letting somebody guide you.
Yeah. I'll tell you what that sparks for me as well, Maria, because I love this thought. I've seen recently the power of reverse mentoring in action as well. So you've got the classic mentor is someone that's more senior, that's walked the path, and this asking for help of someone that's much more junior than you and genuinely being interested. This is not a game, but actually asking for their advice. And so whilst they haven't walked the path, they might have a perspective. And I've seen that to good effect for me, but also with some of the leaders I work with who are doing that. And it's one of the areas where people might be even more reluctant to ask for help off a junior person rather than someone more senior to them because of the social hierarchies that we operate in. Have you seen anything in that space at all that seems to be working well?
Well, that reminds me of, for example, my daughter. As a typical Gen Xer, I have difficulty with social media and marketing in social media. And my daughter has been key in giving me some advice and letting me know how her generation perceives certain things and helping me get over that cringe factor, as somebody of my generation. I don't feel usually comfortable with posting or recording myself. It seems a little strange, unnatural for us because we didn't do it as we were growing up. So she's been very supportive in guiding me and helping me, especially as I'm, moving along with certain new things.
Yeah, well, that's a great example. Let's take a look at your second point. And maybe this is a lovely bridge from what you've just said. This continual striving to learn and not being fixed in our knowledge. I mean, you've just given a great example of that. But why was this a significant, or in what way is this a significant leadership lesson for you?
Because sometimes, for example, as a corporate trainer or coach, you learn a certain amount and you think, okay, and you might be a little complacent, like, okay, I've got it down pat, I've got certain specialties and I'm done, but you don't realize how much more there is. And if you want to keep relevant, you have to continually be learning things. I think now the speed with which we are required to learn has become exponential, especially when it comes to technology, to artificial intelligence. It seems like the tools keep getting more sophisticated, but at the same time, they're making our lives easier, which in turn means that more is required of us. The quality of our output has to be better all the time. So we can never be complacent. There's always a new learning curve that we have to get over. So I have learned more in this last year than I think I learned in the previous 3.
Yeah. Yeah. It is incredible, isn't it? I've learned from others that to try to set myself a different challenge on occasions has been quite good, to take me into a different field of learning. So there's the staying up to date from a technical point of view, or from detail in terms of different models, frameworks, different ways of thinking in our leadership space or coaching space, these type of things, which I really enjoy. And then a few years, for example, I went and did singing lessons. I joined a volleyball team last year, and have really recognized the critical importance of unlearning in the learning process. So kind of the rewiring that's required to take something which you thought was the right way to do it and realize that there's a better way. And that's really tricky. And I really love the stretch of going into that space of unlearning or doing something very different to perhaps the way I've done it, for years, for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fascinating place to be.
For sure.
Hopefully increases our empathy when we're dealing with participants, learners on a course, or a coachee who's perhaps struggling a little bit. Is really, I know what that feels like.
Yes.
And it's a fascinating thing. What's the next learning space for you, do you think, Maria?
One thing that I definitely learned, and sometimes I learned it the hard way, was that you can be strong in your communication without having to be aggressive. I think as time goes by and you become older and wiser, you realize that it's more about figuring people out and speaking their language rather than imposing an idea or imposing your will on people. You get a lot farther if you just know how to adjust your message. And that's one thing I've learned. I mean, through the years, and also through my intercultural experiences, right? Being a little more situational with how I communicate with people.
Great. Now, you have written a book called Untangling Communication. That's been a nice Amazon bestseller, Maria. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That, written and also out. I'm interested in this space. Clearly, when you channel your thoughts into writing a book, there's some things you probably have uncovered that you didn't know that you knew so deeply. What's been the biggest insight, do you think, around this topic of communication and being strong that's come out from writing Untangling Communication?
Well, there were a few subjects that I have heard over and over again through my 20 years of training and coaching, which usually center around: how do I manage conflict? Or how do I give somebody feedback without demoralizing them? Or how do I deal with a team that has totally different cultural values than me? Or how do I communicate with someone, like we just said, who's from a different generation? So I tried to figure out, is there a model that can work cross-culturally, cross-generationally, that can help us decrease the probability of escalating conflict, that can help us with a few different things? And I kind of came up with a kind of like a preventative measure, if you want to see it that way, by putting together a model that I call CLEAR.
Yes.
Which kind of encompasses a bunch of different things. It doesn't mean it's a cure-all for everything, but if we get into the habit of using certain sequences when we're communicating, it can make our lives a little bit easier. So starting out, by just conveying a little bit of context, and then when we're listening, being empathetic, and then adjusting our message and reframing it that usually helps to make those knots kind of be untangled a little bit easier.
So when is this most useful? So thinking about this clear framework, what am I faced up against that says, actually, let me just pause and just go through this as a reminder before I engage?
For example, well, you can use it in a personal environment or a professional, but so many of the complaints that I hear when I'm working with my clients, who are usually executives or leaders, they'll say things like, I thought I was clear, but I have to repeat myself. Or how do I motivate my team? Or how do I get across to people? And a lot of times they start out with their request, or they make a sweeping statement and they start with the what and the how. And you'll see that people may push back, maybe in a passive aggressive way. So they're like, yeah, and then they don't do anything. And what I usually recommend is just giving a couple of sentences of explaining to the person what your vision is and why you are going to make a request. It shows people the courtesy of walking them through, taking them by the hand and walking them through your reasoning, so that they can align with you from the very beginning, and you're not struggling and having to explain it afterwards when people are like, but why should I do this? So if you get ahead of the game, give a little bit of context, explain your reasoning, it's easier for people to align, and it becomes more about problem solving than a battle of wills. And I think that I can tell you at a personal level, that has helped me so much, even with my family.
Great. So let's walk through these 5 elements again, because I know you rolled them off very naturally, which is perfect. Yeah. So let's just make sure they're really clear, I guess, for the
no pun
for the listener. All right. So C stands
convey
for
context. That's starting with the why. Why I want you to do this. Why? What is my vision? Where do I want to go? What's the purpose? That's basically that first thing.
Yeah.
Giving and it doesn't have to be a whole thesis, just explaining, I'd like to make sure that we do X, Y, and Z. I'd like to, what is it? So what's the prelude to the next thing, which usually is a request, or it could be a feedback, or it could be asking somebody to do something, stop doing something, whatever. And so starting out with the why kind of establishes the framework for what comes next.
Great. Then we've got the L.
Listen and empathize. So as the conversation unfolds, because at that point, once you've said why you want something and you've made your request, you can listen and empathize and see if there is some kind of objection. When you're listening and empathizing, you're asking open-ended questions. So it's all about asking the open-ended questions.
So the L and the E are very closely linked together.
They're together. They kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So as you're listening, you're asking open-ended questions, it's coming in, you're processing. There might be new information that you didn't know before. So it makes it easier. The person who has maybe already aligned with you when you gave your context is able to establish a conversation where you might be able to listen to their why, and then get to a point where it's easier to come up with solutions together, or at very least for you to understand where they're coming from. So the last 2 steps, which is adjust and reframe, with the new information that you just gathered from listening empathetically, it becomes a little bit easier to adjust your message, because maybe you were starting off with an assumption, but it became clear to you that it's not going that way, it's this way, and this is where the objection lies. So you can adjust, maybe present it in a more palatable way. Okay, so what you're saying is that this process is causing difficulty because it doesn't take into account some other stakeholders or something else in the process, right? Yeah. Okay. So what if we, and then that way you can adjust and reframe your message because you've listened and you've had the empathy to see where they're coming from, and then you can reframe it. And when you reframe positively, you're coming up with real solutions so that you're not stuck in the battle of wills. I need for you to do this. And the other person might be like, yeah, whatever. And they don't. And then you have to go back and have a conversation. So it kind of cuts through a lot of that back and forth that you hear so much that happens in organizations by starting out, going a little deeper and making sure that your message lands the way you want it to land from the very beginning.
Love that. And you prefix that last, like the phrasing there, what if we, you kind of proposed a potential solution.
Exactly.
Without saying we must or you should. It was like exploring a solution with them going forward as part of that reframing.
Exactly.
Have I understood that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Super. Great. So we've got convey context, listen and paraphrase, empathize, adjust approach, reframe positively. That's the clear framework.
That's it.
Very good. Now let's just go back to the listen and empathize. This is a topic that is eternal in terms of the guests that I speak with. Listening often comes up. What is your top tip, I guess, beyond what you've already shared, to help a leader who is, let's give the context. I do not agree with this person. In fact, I'm maybe a little triggered by their response to my conveying context.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I need to listen, Maria. I know I need to empathize, but I don't want to because they're wrong. I'm right. How do you help? How can I listen and paraphrase when I've got this emotion that's perhaps saying, I don't know, they're an idiot?
That's always a hard thing because you're already a little predisposed. So it goes back to employing a little bit of emotional intelligence, going back and doing a mind frame adjust. To me, especially when there's somebody who just rubs me the wrong way, I try to picture them. Sometimes it may sound silly, but if I can picture them as a child, it softens me up.
Yeah.
And I always remember an anecdote in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I remember very clearly the story where he is on the subway and a man is there with 2 children. The children are misbehaving to the point that he actually taps the man on the shoulder and says, "Please control your children." And the man says to him, "I'm so sorry. I'm just coming back from the hospital. My wife has just passed away." So he all of a sudden, he sees this man in a totally different light with a huge amount of compassion, and he's not judging him in the same way.
Yeah.
So it's really important to take that step back, get out of our own reality, our own mindset that somebody's just trying to make our lives difficult, and have the compassion and the empathy to think they are probably doing the best they can within whatever context they're living. They may be having an issue at home. They may be having an issue with somebody in their team. It could be anything. So we're not that important that people get up in the morning to try to make us their victim. So I tell people, get over yourself. It's not about you. It isn't. So take that step back, change the mind frame a little bit. The same annoyance that you might be feeling, they might feel about you. And what are you doing to make that person, react in a certain way? So nobody's this pure white dove. We all have our issues and our baggage. So taking that step back, doing a self-assessment, like a little bit of that emotional intelligence. Okay, let me be aware. This person annoys me. Could it be that they remind me of an obnoxious family member? What's going on, right? This bothers me. Okay, so what am I going to do about it? Am I going to lash out and say something I might regret? Or can I just have a little bit of self-control? And what could be going on in their life? Why could they be behaving the way they are? And then finally, how am I going to approach them? So those 4 elements are a basic scan of emotional intelligence before we engage in a conversation, especially if it's a delicate conversation that we need to have, whether it's giving somebody feedback or having a difficult conversation where we tell them, listen, I'd like to improve our relationship. I'd like to make sure that we do things smoothly, but you have to be in the right frame of mind before you have that conversation. Otherwise, you're just you're asking to be triggered and asking to make a mess of things.
And you've labeled the book Untangling Communication. What I'm hearing is it's very easy to come into this with a whole lot of mess in your head around the other person, and their, like, if there is a history there, it's all knotty, whatever. What you're suggesting there is a bit of kind of untangling your own framework, your own mental model of this person and the situation before you engage. Otherwise, you take a lot of that noise, that messiness into the dialogue, and you think you're following the clear framework, but in fact it's all in knots.
Exactly.
Am I missing something?
Yes,
on that
yes. And again, it's situational, but depending on the outcome you want in the conversation, will you prepare? It's like anything. Yeah. If you prepare for a presentation, it goes better. If you prepare for a speech, it goes better. If you prepare for a homework, it goes better. So why not prepare for those conversations that have an important outcome? You know, going through it in your mind. I mean, the everyday, hi, how are you? Okay, small talk is not quite as important, but if you need an outcome, especially as a leader, and you want to make sure that the relationship goes well, it's important to consider not just your objective, because of course, in any kind of interaction, there is an element of negotiation, there is an element of persuasion, but it's not just about what you want. There's also the element of the relationship. How are you going to keep that balance? If you just go full throttle on what you want, you know, this might get affected, and the next interaction you have, it's not going to go so well. And on the other hand, if you're just a pleaser and you just do whatever, you're not going to get this done. So how do you create that nice balance?
Yeah, I mean, that actually ties in nicely with your point around being strong without aggression. So let's speak to the pleaser. Let's speak to the person who maybe struggles to get their point across because they don't want to be unkind, or they are scared they're going to upset somebody, or it's going to get too emotional, they can't handle it. So they avoid being strong because they might interpret that as strong as aggression. How do we help leaders or people to have that courage to be strong without getting aggressive?
I usually recommend, I don't know if listeners have heard of the concept of vulnerability-based leadership. You can be a leader and be very much respected even if you're vulnerable. And by vulnerable, I mean being able to admit if you don't know something, or being able to admit if you get angry and are able to apologize, or anything of the sort. So even somebody who might be a little bashful or shy about giving feedback or asking for something, it's okay to start off by giving a little bit of that context again. If you start with the context, you're being strong in the sense that you are being vulnerable, and at the same time, you're establishing your expectations. Yeah. So as a leader or somebody who's working with a different stakeholder, this is my objective. This is what I'm trying to achieve. But I'm having the courtesy to bring you into my reasoning, and I'm showing a little bit of vulnerability because there's that understanding that this is something that concerns me, or something that I worry about, or something that I need to get achieved. And it's okay to maybe even throw in not just the company objective or whatever, but your own personal need as well. So you could always say, I would really like for us to achieve this, or I want to make sure that we have a nice, fluid working relationship, or I'd like to make sure that we achieve the results or the KPIs. I want to make sure. So you're saying out loud, you're saying what you want. that is something that even somebody who is a little bit, I don't know, I want to say a little timid about being forceful can do in a way that's respectful and courteous and at the same time strong.
Yeah, I like that. So there's strength in the clarity at the start around the
Exactly.
context that they provide, that we're not dodging and fluffing that up with a lot of noise. We're being really clear. But there's also strength to realize that actually the other person's opinion is important here. That takes strength in a different way, doesn't it? To kind of be open to listen and empathize. There's a strength as long as we then can work with it and adjust rather than just roll over if they've got a completely different opinion.
Exactly. And in that clarity, that context initially, it rolls into or bleeds into the empathy, because if you can manage to not only say what your objective is, but what's in it for the other person, then you probably have half the battle won right there.
Yeah.
When you
Nice.
when you speak in a language that's more empathetic, I imagine that you would like also to be able to get things done quicker. I imagine that you also are very busy in the time that you have, or if you are courteous and considerate in that approach, it's a lot easier for the other person to be willing to listen to you and want to cooperate.
You made a link earlier to this idea of intercultural sensitivity, and I know you work across different cultural environments in terms of the different languages and different countries that you operate in. In what ways does this help in an intercultural setting?
Well, even before you start the interaction, it's important to understand what's going on in different environments. So a lot of times when we think about the Johari window, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so you go into an interaction with somebody from a different culture, assuming that everyone just treat everybody as you like to be treated, but nothing could be further from the truth. And that's what gets us in trouble, because we assume that respect is, we all understand respect, but how you show respect is going to be very different from one culture to the other. So I'll give you an example. I was working with an American group and a Mexican group, and they were working cross-culturally within the same company. But the American guy, he would say to me, Maria, why is it that when we are on the Teams chat, my Mexican colleague, we'll call him Pedro just writes to me and he's like, hi, Eric, how are you? And then crickets, like, why is he waiting for me to say fine? And you, before he asks me what he wants, why can't he just get to the point? Yeah. It's ridiculous. And he goes, and I've seen this pattern with a lot of my Mexican colleagues. And I just had to laugh. And he's like, what? Why? It's a waste of time. It annoys me and I just don't get it. And I had to explain to him. I said, look, Mexico's it's a relationship-oriented culture. You come from a task-oriented culture. So for you, respect is shown by being considerate of your time. So you feel like they're being a little disrespectful by just making you waste all this time with all this small talk. Whereas for them, if somebody just gets into business, like saying, hey, do you have this and that? Can you help me with this and that, without properly greeting the person, that's kind of seen as disrespectful. So what is the right way? If you don't know what the right way is for the other person, how are you going to be situational if you don't know, you don't know what you don't know? So knowing some of these things, and sometimes unless you have like an ambassador who can translate for you, you don't know these things. Yeah. So certain patterns of behavior can get under your skin and get you really annoyed because you're making assumptions about the other culture, which don't apply. So I could tell you so many examples of that I've had to work with different teams to help them understand. And so once he realized that they weren't being annoying, they were waiting for him to give them permission to make their request, because they didn't want to assume that he was just there to take care of what they needed. Then he had like this new perspective. He's like, oh, they're trying to be nice and not make assumptions of, oh, okay. And then like, okay. So then it didn't bother him as much to say, fine, and you.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah. How do you get past those things? You need to some of those things you need to learn a little bit before you jump right in. So I
Yeah, I
mean,
guess
and
it's that
yes,
emotional intelligence piece again, is it? Picking up the cues and spotting what's working, what's not, what's triggering,
yes,
asking questions in terms of finding out what would work more effectively. It's interesting, there's an element of learning how to dance to the right rhythms of those different cultures that we're operating in, and helpful if both parties are trying to make some adjustment, I guess, rather than just one. But it can be a little bit tricky not to swing the pendulum too far the other way, and making sure that the clarity in the conversation is still there. The purpose of the reason for the conversation is still being met on both sides, I guess.
yes.
Yeah. Maria, the purpose of writing the book and the bit that you're hoping people will get from Untangling Communication is what? What would you hope if someone, there's 10 different books that they've got on the shelf, they see Untangling Communication, why should they pick that one off or choose it from Amazon? What is it that you're hoping it will achieve for them?
I'm thinking that when it comes to the typical things that people struggle with, especially in a work environment, these will be it will be a very simple solution to some of those typical challenges. And my passion is, since there are certain things that I'm able to see after so many years and living abroad for more than half my life, just untangling a lot of those overwhelming or daunting issues, and like kind of like a knot unraveling. It can be a little hard in the beginning, but once you get that little end and it starts like untangling, it's so satisfying. You're like, oh, finally. That's my hope for people who pick up the book, to make it so easy that they're like, oh, I realize what I've been struggling with, and now there's this very simple way that I can approach something that I've been pushing aside or postponing for a while.
Yeah, and I can speak from firsthand experience. I was blessed to be someone on the pre-read list, Maria. Thank you very much for that.
And thank
And
you.
and the timing was perfect, because there was a particular conflict situation I was working through, and I was reading your work, and it was really helpful to kind of, I would say, kind of slow down. It was almost in slow motion, and just break down some of the component parts and help me think a bit more clearly about how I was going to have the conversation to be more constructive, because it had kind of got a bit discordant already. So it was a really good way to kind of just press pause and look through how I could process my own thinking first of all, but then also to communicate more effectively. It led to far more constructive outcomes. So I appreciate that. The timing was perfect.
Wow, that's great. Was there anything particular in that chapter on conflict management that helped you out?
I think there's something, I can't remember, that I haven't got the model in front of me here, but there's something in actually being able to put myself in the other person's shoes a bit more and think about, so it wasn't a different culture.
Uh-huh.
It was same culture, but it was a different personality, if we can call it that, different drivers. And so I was seeing the problem very much through my own lens. It was classic. I mean, I know this stuff. I'm going to teach it, but it was great to be reminded of it in the moment, to be able to slow down and put myself more from the perspective of the other person's. And I think there was a checklist that I worked through that was just really helpful, that helped me think about the other person more than me.
Great. I'm glad.
And so thank you for that. It was much appreciated. Okay. How do people speak to you more, Maria, if they want to find out a little bit more about this?
People can reach me on LinkedIn, Maria Garaitonandia. My last name's it's a challenge, but you'll find that there's not too many of us, so it's pretty easy. And also, I have my webpage, mariagaraitonandia.com or globalbridgestraining.com. Great. And I'm on social media also under my name, Maria Garaitonandia.
Super. And what advice would you give to that 25-year-old version of yourself?
Go out and touch grass. Don't sit behind a screen all day. Make sure you know what? I saw recently a young person in her 20s, and she was saying how small talk is so cringe for her. And I felt bad because there is such great satisfaction in talking to a stranger and finding what you have in common. So don't think that small talk is cringe. It's fulfilling, and it will give you so much. It will help you become a better leader if you know how to break the ice with anybody. Go ahead and just find somebody and have a conversation with them.
Yeah. I would add to that, there's something around finding ground that is not common as well. Like it's lovely when you hit the jackpot where you've got something common, but isn't it fascinating when you meet a stranger who opens up a whole new world to you that you didn't even know existed, and you've never been there before?
Absolutely.
And maybe even disagree on a few things, but you can, so rich once you open up those types of conversations. Maria, I wish you the very best of success with your work and the books specifically, and hope many people will be able to use it as a method to take those knots that are in some of the relationships and untie them and untangle them, take some ownership in that process of untangling the communication. So very good, best of luck in your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us at the After Dinner Leadership Table, and trust that you've got good value from listening to this episode. Thanks for being here. One question for you. The question is, so what? What will you do with what you've just heard? And here's a few suggestions. Number 1, lead with more purpose. 2, mentor with patience. 3, share with pride. You think of anyone who you know that would benefit from listening to what you've just heard, that would help them to be a better leader today or in the future. Please share, like, subscribe. It helps other people to consume the content. And we wish you all the very best of success. And please listen again to another After Dinner Leadership conversation.